Welcome to another episode of Justin and Donald Save America. If you are a frequent watcher of our show, you know that we talk a lot about ESG, the Great Reset, all these types of good things. Well, it looks like ESG is finding another way to kind of snake into everybody's lives, and it might be in the form of your 401k. We're going to be talking about that on this episode. Of course, I am Donald Kendal, joined by Justin Haskins over here. And before we jump into it, though, I always have to put that message out there to for all of you that are watching this to help us get our message out as much as possible. You could do this by just doing a couple of things. Won't cost you a penny, only will cost you a couple of seconds. Those things are to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, hit that like button, share this content if you think that it's valuable, or just leave a comment underneath the video. All these things help break through that big tech algorithm that prevents content like this from being shown to more people. So, Justin, this is a topic that you were recently writing about in some of your op-eds. The idea that ESG is going to be finding its way into our 401ks. So how big of a deal is this? Give us a rundown.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that you throw it out there and you're not sure how interested people will be in this because it's about like 401ks and retirements, and we've done a lot of stuff on banking, and it's kind of like, I don't know if people are going to care, but they should care about all those things, but on the surface it's not super sexy. But this is getting a lot of traction right now because I think people understand the basics of it are that the Biden administration is trying to coerce people, push people, make it easy for companies to coerce and push people to make their retirement accounts go woke. He wants to promote left-wing causes using people's retirement accounts. So the way this all went down is last week, just before Thanksgiving, when no one was paying any attention to what was going on, the Biden administration announced that there's going to be a new regulation that's going to overthrow some of the regulations that have been in place under Trump, that would allow employers and asset managers, retirement account managers, things like people who are managing your 401k and other retirement accounts, to offer ESG funds to workers. So they're not requiring that they get it, but they're offering it. So ESG funds, for those who haven't been paying attention, haven't been following our channel, you should be following our channel, but if you haven't been, ESG funds are radical investments. They promote left-wing causes like battling climate change and making sure that businesses have the right ratio of one racial group to another racial group, or have the right number of women on the board of directors, or have the right number of transgender managers, or a whole bunch of other things. Like, it's social justice, left-wing causes. That's what ESG funds are. They're trying to promote those things. So in the past, employers and investment managers weren't allowed to offer these as retirement options for people in 401ks and other retirement funds, private pensions, things like that, because the whole point of those things are to help people grow their retirements, not to promote transgenderism and to promote less water use and battling climate change and all the other ESG stuff that's out there, right? It's not a social justice thing. It's about your retirement. So what they did was they put a rule into place under Donald Trump that made that stuff illegal. You couldn't offer those things to people. A lot of people don't know what the best retirement options are for themselves. They're just trusting that their retirement account managers, their employers, are giving them good options, and they're just putting money in it. They're not experts on Wall Street and picking stocks and doing all that stuff, right? So that's why they had those rules in place. So on right before Thanksgiving, Biden overturned that so that now they can offer these products, and not just offer them, but make ESG funds, ESG investments, the default, the automatic option for you if you're investing money in 401k and things like that. So if you work for a company that really likes ESG, like say Bank of America, for example, or really any of the large corporations in America, it's about half of employees work for large corporations. They can now just offer you ESG funds as part of your 401k, and maybe that's all they offer you. And maybe maybe they offer you mostly ESG funds and maybe one fund that isn't an ESG fund, but then they make the default option the ESG fund. And unless you go in and select the one non-ESG fund, you're going to be giving all of your money to these companies that are promoting these woke causes, things that you don't even believe in. So that's where the thrust of this is. The whole point of this is to try to move more capital, more money. There's already trillions and trillions of dollars. You know, I've talked about this a million times, going towards all this stuff as part of the Great Reset movement. But the goal here is to get the several trillion dollars that isn't being used for that, that's in 401k accounts and things like that, to move into these woke causes as well, so that we're promoting this Great Reset agenda that you and I have been talking about for a long time.
Yeah, and one way, and feel free to correct me if you think that I'm kind of off base here, but one way that I always talk about this when I find myself in these conversations about ESG and the Great Reset is this idea that there's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy going on here, where it's like originally when ESG was first, like even before we were talking about it, it was always talked about as like this like bad investment. Where it's like, yeah, you could put your money in these ESG funds, but chances are it's not going to perform as well as some of the non-ESG things that are like specifically aligned to ESG causes or anything like that. And that was kind of the defense against ESG from conservative types that even cared about it back then. But as we've uncovered, there's a whole lot of things, a whole lot of carrots and sticks that try to encourage these ESG funds to outperform their more traditional types of investments. And some of those, we've talked about a whole number of it, especially on this podcast. But one of them that you often bring up would be like the principles for responsible investment that has like $150 trillion worth of assets and funds that they like only want to invest in ESG aligned things. And I always say that this is like a self-fulfilling prophecy where these funds are going to outperform their competition because you've got these massive players with an incredible amount of money to the tune of $100 trillion being poured into this. So, when we talk about potential fighting against ESG, and there's a plan that's kind of popular going around red states where it's like, well, why don't we divest our pension systems from this, red state pension systems, and make sure that they can't be invested in ESG. And it's like, yeah, that's great. It's taking like a almost $2 trillion bite out of the apple when it comes to funds pouring into these ESG things. But here's another example of just like a tidal wave of new funds that could be invested into ESG, and Biden's opening the door for it. So you mentioned briefly what would be like. Okay, so like let's say this door was completely open for 401ks to be invested in ESG stuff. What amount of money does that come out to?
Yeah, so there are, as of 2020, like mid 2021, there was over $7 trillion in 401k accounts. $7 trillion. Now, the stock market has gone down since mid 2021 pretty substantially. So it's not going to be $7 trillion. Probably, my guess would be it's probably somewhere around 5 to 7 would be my guess. But we're talking about trillions of dollars.
Right.
We're talking about a lot of money.
I mean,
And
well, just that alone will completely counter, like even if every red state in the entire country were to divest their pension system from this, like this,
yeah.
this more than covers the ground, lost by that in terms of ESG.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no doubt about that. The amount of money that's behind ESG is massive, massive, and that's the whole. That's what this whole thing is built on. The idea that if we just throw enough money in one direction, then people will go and they'll have to go in that direction. Otherwise, there's not going to be any options for them. And so if you can get the big corporations on board with it, and if you think about it, right, if you're a big corporation and you're looking at, because the way 401ks and retirement funds work generally is 401k is a really good retire. For those of you who don't, pay attention to this stuff, you don't have any money in 401k. The way it works generally is you want to save money for retirement. 401k allows you to put money into a retirement account up to a certain amount. Usually the max is like $20,000. I think the max is $20,500. The most you can put in it every year. You can put up to $20,500 into a 401k every year, tax-free. So it's as though you didn't earn, it's as though you didn't earn that money, even though you're keeping it, you're saving it in a retirement fund. All right. It's as though you didn't earn that money. So when it comes tax time, you can, if you are able, depending on how much you put in, you can write that stuff is not counted against you. All right. For tax purposes. So you save all that money on taxes. So let's say
Mm.
you pay 20 or 30% of your income on taxes. You don't pay anything on that money. It goes into this account. And then what that account does is it grows over time because it's in these index funds and stuff. And so if you keep putting money in it over a long period of time, you'll earn a lot of money, right? You'll earn a lot of money over a long time, even at a low return interest rate. You'll earn a lot of money. And so there's a lot of people who don't really understand how that system works, but
Sure.
basically employers choose the funds which options you have for 401k, where you can put your money. You can't just put your money anywhere. It goes into the 401k account, and then you usually will get like a few options of where you can put it. And they're usually these big index funds. And so if you're a big corporation that really loves ESG, and many of them do, the vast majority of them are into ESG, then you're going to give people ESG funds as the investment option because you're the one making the choice. Not only that, but you're incentivized to do it because you have an ESG score that someone has assigned to your business. And if you want a high ESG score, you got to do things that promotes ESG. So one of the ways you would think people would do that is say, well, let's make our employees, if they want to have 401k, let's just give them ESG funds. That's going to help our ESG score. So the whole thing is built on how do we increase this ESG score? How do we make the ESG score better? How do we get more people investing in ESG? Because that will help our ESG investments. When none of this has anything to do with the market or like supply and demand or anything other than it's just this game that they're all playing. And like you said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, oh, ESG funds make money. Well, they make money because they're coercing everybody to put money into it.
Yeah.
It's like, if I went around and put a gun to people's heads and said, give me your money, like, that's not a business. Like, that's not a successful business because I'm making a lot of money. But that's basically how this whole ESG superstructure works. It's all about coercion. It's not about
the way that
supply and demand.
The way that you're describing it there almost makes it seem like a big Ponzi scheme where it's like,
it is.
It's like a Ponzi scheme / like the biggest cronyist system that you could ever imagine. Where it's like, let's take like a micro example of it. Like, let's say there's a big solar panel company, right? They only make solar panels. And they've decided because of some new rule granted to them by the Biden administration that they could have all of their employees' investment 401k funds invested specifically in solar panels. You know what I mean? It's like that just like has cronyism written all over it.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean that's basically what's going on.
It's just on a larger scale. Yeah.
A much bigger scale and much more complex than that, obviously. But basically that's what's going on. The idea is to force people or coerce people to put their money in places that they normally wouldn't put their money in order to advance some cause that they don't really care that much about, but they will if that's how they're making money, if that's sort of where they have to put their money. And so the big question that really comes up with all of this is, why does this, I mean, if you keep following it up, right? Like I understand why I might put money in a 401k account that's ESG related, because maybe that's my only option.
Sure.
And I can understand why the business might offer me an ESG fund because they have an ESG score and they like ESG and they're trying to promote ESG because they've got an ESG score and all this stuff. Okay. But then why does that company do that? If you keep following it up, the ladder, why does this system exist ultimately? Like if we're going to look at the most ultimate reason why this system exists. And the funny thing about it is, I don't know that we have like a clear-cut answer as to why this is all happening at the highest level. We've got theories,
sure,
right? But do we know for sure, like, why the head of BlackRock, who could do anything he wants because he's got control of more money than anybody on the planet, why he loves ESG? Do we really know exactly why? We have theories, but we don't actually.
We're not short on theories.
No, there's all sorts of theories, and they range from like crazy stuff to like just really simple cronyism? Like maybe he's got a way of making money off of this. It's just, but that really is the biggest story of
Well,
this whole ESG Great Reset thing. Is there really is not a clear-cut answer to why it exists at the highest level. We know why it exists all the way up to that point, but once we get to the top, it's anybody's guess, really.
no, see, I think that this is just the largest cronyist system ever. And when you're making the rules, you can make sure that the rules are framed in a way to pick the winners and the losers. And in a traditional capitalist system, in a true free enterprise system, there's a whole bunch of competition. And where you're the big dogs in the pile, a generation ago, fast forward 10 years, you might not be anymore. So I feel like this is just a way to construct a system where we get to pick the winners and the losers. We get to, push people out, even if they're better than us in a competitive source, because they're not playing by the rules exactly the way we want them to. So I think this is a way to establish kind of like the power dynamics that are in there, cement them in place, and and yeah, I think that's what it is. I think that's why it's the big cronyist system. And then one other thing that I always like to point out is, we like a lot of people when they talk about ESG, they use this term woke, and we have it right there in our little banner underneath this video. And I think that it's like so much worse than that. Like even some of the metrics that you pointed out at the very beginning of this, whether it's trying to fight against climate change or have diversity and inclusion quotas and all of that, like that is like one level, and the fact that companies are going to be judged based on that as opposed to just like how good of goods and services they're giving and what costs to consumers and their profit and all of that stuff, like that is like terrible on just that level. But to me, the more important thing to point out about like the ESG system is that this is an end around of government. So if the government has failed time and time again to push through some different social justice legislation or some climate change action, they can't get it through Congress, they can't get it signed by the president, anything like that. Well, this is a way to backdoor all of it through the most powerful financial institutions around the world to seek that goal, even if the government can't do it. And to
Yeah.
think that it's going to be limited at just what the metrics are right now is naive. And I think, and I've been saying this every time we ever talk about ESG, that if you think that this is going to be, it's not going to go as far as infringing upon free speech rights or infringing upon the Second Amendment or anything like that in the future, you're crazy.
Well,
So
we already know that that's the case. We have examples of ESG reports where social media companies are punished with their ESG scores, which is tied to their access to capital through bond markets and things like that. It's more expensive for them to get access to capital because they did not do enough censoring on their social media accounts. And we have examples of banks and financial institutions using ESG as a way to screen out certain gun sellers and gun manufacturers and others because they sell legal
there you go.
weapons, not illegal, but legal. But because they don't like them, because these banks don't like them, they screen them out. They won't give them access to capital. So we already know that it's happening to some degree. It's going to get worse is the thing that you're talking about.
Yeah,
So
and anyone that wants to play outside that system and like, all right, well, if you
yeah,
guys are going to handcuff yourself to this, if you're going to handcuff yourself to like making sure that like all the things that you just said, well, then fine, you go do that. I'm not going to play that game.
right.
ESG is constructed in a way to punish those people for not playing that game. So
Yes.
that's why this thing is so insidious, and that's why we've basically dedicated the last couple of years to covering this from any
Yeah.
angle that we can possibly figure out.
Yeah, without a doubt. So one last thing to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to give people some basic suggestions on ways that they can avoid this. So if they've got retirement accounts and they want to figure out a way to not have this happen to them, where they're putting their money towards left-wing causes, they're not going to necessarily get a good return on their investment. There's a lot of research that shows that despite all this coercion, ESG funds are still actually being outperformed by people who are not concerned about ESG, which kind of makes sense, right? So It's not too surprising. So I wanted to give a little bit of advice, just very briefly, not go into lots of details. I'm not an investment manager or anything like
Yeah,
that,
this is not
obviously.
financial advice.
It's not financial advice. But I do want to give people some ideas for ways that they can deal with it. So the first thing that I want people to understand is that the rule does not say you have to invest in ESG funds. It doesn't say that. So your employer and your investment manager might set it up so it feels like you have to, but you really don't have to. So I would begin right now by telling your employer and tell your investment manager or whoever your employer has hired to be the investment manager, you're not interested in ESG funds. You don't want anything to do with ESG investments. You're totally opposed to it. And if they go in that direction, you're actually going to take your money out of that entirely. Be really strong with them about it. Don't be afraid to threaten them with pulling your funds. You don't even actually have to do that. But the point is, at least threaten it so that they're worried about that. I think that's a good first step. Another thing to do is talk to an investment advisor, not your investment manager that your employer has hired necessarily, but your own investment advisor. Ask them how you can protect your assets, your retirement account, what you can do if your employer starts pushing you in the direction of ESG with 401k. Are there any alternatives that give you more control over your own investment? They do exist. They're out there. Everyone is different. Everyone's situation is different. There are all sorts of different rules and things that, so I can't just say, well, put all your money in this. It's more complicated than that. But one sort of common thing you're going to hear a lot is about IRAs. These are individual retirement accounts. They have a lot of tax benefits like 401k. It's not necessarily the same thing. It's not the same thing. There are differences. And for some people, it's a worse option. But IRAs usually give more opportunities for people to pick and choose where their money goes. And so there's more flexibility there, and you might be able to get your money out of ESG if you go in that direction. And there's other things too. So talk to an investment advisor. But these are two really easy things that you can do right away. You can talk to an investment advisor and figure out ways to avoid having your money go to ESG. You can talk to your employer, whoever's in charge of making these decisions for what 401k options and other retirement options or private pensions or however that works. Figure out who those people are. Talk to them. Tell them you don't want this, even if they don't offer it right now. Tell them don't make this an option. I don't want this. And if you do both of those things, you talk to your employer, talk to your investment manager, find an investment advisor of your own, you can figure out ways to get out of this. This is not a surefire thing. They are banking on you not doing this. That's the plan. The plan is people are too apathetic. People aren't going to pay attention. They're just going to keep putting money in their 401k accounts, and the money's going to start going into promoting ESG, and they're not even going to realize it or care. It's just going to go to some index fund, and people don't know how that works, and they don't care. And as long as their money is growing a little bit, doesn't really matter to them. Well, if you don't want to promote ESG, you don't want to promote left-wing causes, you need to get your money out of this. Make sure that it's not happening to you. It wouldn't be happening to you right now. This rule just happened. This change just happened. So for most people, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and find out that you're giving money to ESG funds. But that's the thing. They're banking on you not paying attention to this over the long run. So this is a big long-term problem that you're going to have to be proactive about. But if you are proactive about it, you can avoid it.
Okay. Well, I think those are all good words of advice here. And obviously, you've got this article written for Fox News. So I'll probably put the link to that in the show notes if you want to read more up about all of this. But yeah, man. ESG is the backbone of the Great Reset. We've been sounding this alarm for a while now, and it's an evolving story. It seems like it's only getting worse and worse. But there are glimmers of hope, and things that are happening to kind of put the fight to these people. So we're going to continue to talk about it here on the Justin and Donald Save America show on Stopping Socialism TV. We're going to continue to do more work here at the Heartland Institute and everything that we can to push back against this terrible, terrible thing. Justin, where can the fine people go to find more of your work?
They can find me at, well, they can go to foxnews.com. I've got articles there all the time. The Federalist, I've got some articles, Newsweek, although I haven't written there in a while. The Hill just had an article recently there. And stoppingsocialism.com, obviously, heartland.org, all great places to go. Social media at Justin T. Haskins on everything: Twitter, Facebook, Getter, Parler, all of that's good stuff.
Yep, absolutely. And the same goes for the Stopping Socialism project here at the Heartland Institute. You can find us on all the different social medias, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or you name it. And also go to stoppingsocialism.com.
Sorry.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode. And yeah, like I said at the beginning of all this, you could help us out. You can help break through those big tech algorithms just by doing a handful of things. It'll only cost you a couple of seconds, and that includes sharing this content, hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already, leaving a comment underneath the video, or just simply hitting that like button. But that'll do it for us for this episode. We will talk to you next time.